Hey, hey, yo. Okay, so I know I said that I was really tired, and I am, but I consistently preach that motivation and determination are two different things, and I've got a packed schedule. So I'm going to go ahead and record one more episode on dismissing control. So, control is a huge, huge thing that can impact our lives from all different ways, shapes, and forms. It could be us, it could be the people around us, it can be the people who raised us. But control can cause a lot of issues, a lot of unnecessary stress. And so, learning how to detach from the outcome of things that are happening in our lives and just allow the chips to fall where they may, because often if you feel like you need to take control, there is a lesson in there for you, no matter how small, no matter how minuscule, or no matter how silly. That is one that I have um, come across, is that I have felt the need to exert power into places that are draining of energy. And it is a little bit difficult when you recognize that you are the one that is in charge of laying boundaries. Now, there is a difference between laying boundaries and taking control over situations. Boundaries state, these are my guidelines to being around me. Control is, you're not going to be around me unless you're A, B, C, or D. And if you don't fit into that category, I'm going to make sure that you're uncomfortable. You don't know it. I mean, that you know it. You don't know it. I'm going to exert control and you're going to have no idea. Well, actually, that's the thing too, right? And that's how we find ourselves in toxic relationships, because the manipulation can start out very, very small or even beneficial, right? Let's say that you are in a relationship with someone, they make really good money, but like you magnetize this person into your life because you are just like on your top game, you're doing really good, you're successful, you're doing great in your career. And then here comes Mr. Perfect or Mrs. Perfect. And you're like, wow, this is everything I've been waiting for. I'm so excited. And then before you know it, you guys are making future plans and they're like, "Oh, you know what? I think I would really like for you to stay home. You know, we're talking about starting a family. I'm able to cover all of the bills. It would just be really nice if you would just quit your job and I'll take care of you." And I mean, first of all, if I were on the receiving end of that, I'd be like, "Really? Oh, okay, cool." I'm tired. Like, life is exhausting. If I had some knight in shining armor come in talking about, let me just take one for the team here. You kick back, relax, have dinner ready, which by the way will be a frozen meal. Then oh, here comes my dog again. And I also like to look at this as another form of like confirmation, right? I feel like when animals get involved or they bark at certain times, for me, bark because I have a dog. And I don't know if you guys can hear, but my neighbor's dogs, which can probably hear me because my screen door is open. So, anyways, back to the original topic. And yeah, if I had a knight in shining armor that came in and was like, I just want to take care of you, I would be like, me? That sounds wonderful. Yeah, but it's not you, Bubby. You are like my knight in shining armor, but you just don't make any money. So that's not going to work. um, but anyway, so they come in and it's a slow process. And then they feed you ideas. And so that's where control can come in. And it doesn't seem like control until all of a sudden you're lost and you're like, how on earth did I get here? Now, when we're trying to control situations in our own lives, and we have expectations, they're the killer of like growth and flexibility, right? Especially flexibility, because when you have an expectation on how something's going to go, or what the outcome is going to be. If you don't receive that exact outcome, it makes you less flexible to what is available to you, and that will limit your growth. And when you have that adaptability and the flexibility, you're able to look at the positives of everything, or learn how to make situations beneficial for you, right? Like if you have to exert boundaries, not control, but boundaries in situations where you don't feel like you should be or feel like you have to, then you're not looking at it as an opportunity of growth for yourself, because maybe there was somewhere along the lines that you could have said something differently just right off from the jump, from the start, to let that person know. So that way, when they cross that boundary, it's not that heavy of an ordeal for them. Or if it is that heavy of an ordeal for them, they don't respect you anyways, right? So, for example, I don't like sharing my location with people. It's not a thing for me. I don't enjoy it. I think it's weird. I don't feel like people need to know where I'm at all the time. And so I had expressed this to a friend, and then ultimately, the very last conversation I had with them, which, so I expressed them, I didn't like sharing locations. I thought it was weird. And it was due to an issue that they were having in their relationship with their partner, sharing locations, and things were like popping up. And it was just like weird. Right. And so I expressed my thoughts and opinions on the sharing locations bullshit. Um, like, I maybe if I was married, and I definitely do with my daughter, but that's the only person, right? And at some point in time, I don't even remember how it happened, but she's like, "Oh," and like sent like a location request or something. I don't know. I don't remember. It's like I blocked it out or something. But in that moment, instead of hitting like until end of day, I hit indefinitely. And I don't feel like any of that is ever by mistake, right? Because as soon as I hit indefinitely, I was like, oh shit, oh my God, what am I going to do? And then I could have backed out like at the end of the night. I could have stopped sharing my location, but I didn't. And then days go on, weeks go on, blah, 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 whatever. And then finally one day I have the kahunas and I'm like, look, I don't want to share locations because I'm not comfortable with it. And it's something that I expressed to you. Boom, that person was gone. Like there were some other factors that came into play, but they had nothing to do with me. It had to do with like a third party, right? And so just by me re-establishing a boundary, that person disappeared. And ultimately that person was like an energy vampire. And there were a lot of things that I was being shown, and a lot of different signs that I had seen, and I um wasn't paying attention to them, right? I was dismissing them. So, anyways, so that can also be a factor that happens, that you express your boundaries and you share your boundaries, and then ultimately they're not respected. You try to reestablish your boundaries, and that person's like, well, boom, bye. I don't even care anymore. So, and you know what? And that's okay too, because I've gotten really good at detachment in a non-asshole-ish way, right? And so also the control will create stress and anxiety, unnecessary stress and anxiety. And that's also attached to expectations and outcomes of situations, or how you want to see something happen, or how you want the ending to be, or what response you want to receive from somebody. It causes strain on relationships, especially if you've ever been in like a friendship or a relationship with someone who is constantly trying to establish control and dominate the relationship. It's ultimately like a lack of trust, and nobody deserves that unless you have done certain things in your time and people don't trust you for those reasons. If you're evolving and changing, because we all make mistakes, but if you're evolving and you're changing and you're still being treated with a lack of trust, then it's time to establish some boundaries. And it can be hard to evolve and change. So for those of you who know a little bit about my background, I was probably a huge supporter of Captain Morgan for a very long time. Not probably I was. What I was going to say is I was probably one of the highest contributors to the Captain Morgan company at one point in time. And so I had to then go back into my relationships and regain trust, right? There comes a point in time, though, where you can no longer allow this past version of you to define you. And when people continue to remind you of that, then it's time to separate yourself, put some distance between you and that person or those people, or even sometimes your family, because they're not allowing you to make those changes. So if there's still a lack of level of trust and it's due to current behaviors and actions, then maybe it's time to reevaluate what you're doing and why you're doing it, because those are often signs that you're not going down the right path. You could be attached to societal norms, right? Like it would be normal for you to be in a relationship. Your family wants you in a relationship. You've been in a long-term relationship, maybe, and maybe this person makes you look good and there's a sense of home or something with them, but you're not in love with them anymore. And so you have like this wandering eye, or you feel like you're diving into like lust or whatever the case may be. Well, you need to evaluate your circumstances, your situations, and really think about everyone that's involved in that, and the collateral damage of who you're hurting because you're unwilling to be honest with yourself. Um, Control will reduce resilience. It will stop you from being able to bounce back from situations, again, attached to expectations and outcomes. Um, and it will stop your creativity because you have a very set way of how you want things done, how you want things to turn out. And this also, we can even flip that into the terms of a relationship, right? Because you have a list of things, or maybe this other person has a list of things that they feel make a relationship, and therefore you must stay within those constructs. And it doesn't allow you to steer off the path because you have to be a certain way, act a certain way, present a certain way. So ultimately, it will always lead to disappointment, whether that's in yourself or with the people around you or in your relationship, because you're not able to express in new ways. You're not able to evolve. It's like when you're exerting control, it has to be a certain way. Everything has to be a certain way. You have to be a certain way, respond a certain way, act a certain way, walk on eggshells, or whatever the case may be. So when we learn to let go of having control, we are now cracking into that ego, right? Because the ego mind is what tells us that things need to be a certain way when they don't have to be a certain way. They really don't. And there's a level of comfortability when you have control. You feel like you have power. You feel like you are able to maintain controlled chaos, as some would call it. But ultimately, it will leave you drained. It will leave you worn out, especially if people aren't acting accordingly to your plan. I remember, oh, gosh, one time for Christmas, we were doing like Christmas cookies, and I don't know what was wrong with me. I think I was just intoxicated at the time. But I went around to everyone throughout the entire like Christmas cookie party and was like, why are you doing that? And don't do that. And you gotta do this. And Santa doesn't like this, and reindeer are brown, and it's red and green and white, guys. What are you doing? Santa Claus has a hat. Like, don't eat the hat. Like, oh my God, it was so crazy. And my friends ended up telling me the next day, like, they don't ever want to decorate Christmas cookies with me again. And to even just like take a look at that point in time in my life, uh alcohol gave me the opportunity to use my voice in ways that I was never comfortable with doing it before. Sadly, that resulted in me even controlling how Christmas cookies were going to look. And I think I'm gonna need to upgrade to a new internet plan if I'm gonna continue doing this. Okay, so yeah, anyways, my friends didn't want to do Christmas cookies with me ever again. So that's that. But I just wanted to touch on control and how it is a skill to learn when you're being controlling and when you are laying boundaries, when you're in the right for laying boundaries, and when you are acting from a place of power or a place of fear, because that's really where exerting control comes from. And also being able to look at situations that you have around you. If you feel like you're out of control because you're lacking boundaries, that's also a lesson for you to be able to step in and figure out what it is that you need to be doing differently, because something is going on that is so chaotic that it's driving you crazy and it's stressing you out, and you're not quite sure how to go about handling it. So, at that point, I would suggest meditating and taking a look within to see what it is that you could be doing differently. So that way you can always pull a lesson out of what is happening. Because if things are not even keel in your life and you're not super happy with the way that everything is going, there is a lesson there. There is something that is worth tuning into to figure out, how can I move this energy? Because I know that I'm gearing towards being a better person. I know that I want to do things differently. I want to handle situations differently. Maybe I want to change who I am so I can change how do I say this without sounding like egotistical, but wanting to present yourself in a different way so the world sees you from a different point of view, but not stemming from this grandiose thought process, just that I'm going to evolve and change. I want to evolve and change. And this is a characteristic that I would like to adapt, because we'll often find that when we are up against those obstacles are often our points in time where we get to make those changes, where we get to, like I said before, dip our toes into the water and start to see what it feels like. Or we're learning a lesson that we don't want to do this anymore. It's not necessarily that if you find yourself in a situation where you're trying to figure out, are you taking control or are you needing to lay boundaries, because things are just kind of messy. They're messy and it makes you feel uncomfortable. That can also be a lesson that you are not in the right space, not in the right place, and not doing the right thing, especially if you feel energetically drained. So, that can also create chaos. If you feel energetically drained because you're in the repetition of doing the same things over and over and over again, or having the same conversations, like I had mentioned previously, my dad worked the same job for 30 years and he was an optometrist. And so he asked the same questions every day, multiple times a day for, I don't it probably more than 30 years, honestly. But it's like one or two, one or two, three or four, three or four. Which one looks better to you, one or four? I mean, I don't know. I think I would eventually lose my mind having to fry the same fish over and over and over again. So that's another thing that is worth taking a look at. And again, I love my dad to death. I love him to death. Let me clarify that. I love my dad to death. I just could not imagine continuing to do the same thing day in and day out. And that can be your cue that it's time to find your passion. All right, you guys. I am going to wrap it up here because I am super exhausted. So I'm going to go lay down and go to bed. All right. I love you.